My father kicked me out of the house, but I found a family that loved me without conditions. It's strange how life can change in the blink of an eye. One minute, everything is just as it always was, and the next, you're standing on the edge of something you can't even begin to understand. I was 16 years old when everything went from normal to absolutely terrifying. It started with a simple realization. A realization I never thought I would have to face so soon. I was pregnant. It wasn't like the movies, where everything feels magical and beautiful. No, this wasn't a dream come true. This was a nightmare. The kind that comes in the middle of the night and steals your breath. I wasn't ready to be a mother. I wasn't even sure what I was ready for. But here I was, 16 years old, with no idea of how this was even possible. The man who had done this to me wasn't someone I could trust or even respect. He was twice my age, a man I barely knew. He had forced himself on me, and that had left me with more than just a broken heart. It left me with a child that I never asked for, a child that I didn't even want. I had to keep it a secret at first. I didn't know how to tell anyone, let alone my father. But the longer I hid it, the harder it became. Eventually, the truth came out. It was a day I'll never forget. My father found out, and the moment he did, everything in my world came crashing down. I expected disappointment. I expected anger. But what I didn't expect was to be thrown out like some kind of burden, some kind of shame he didn't want to carry. I could still hear his voice, cold and unforgiving, as he told me to leave. I remember him saying, "You're nothing but a disgrace. You've ruined everything." I stood there in shock, not understanding how someone who should have been my protector could treat me like this. No sympathy, no care, just anger and disdain. "Get out of my house," he spat at me. "You're no daughter of mine." That was White the Davis. It was like the ground beneath me had disappeared, and I was falling into an abyss I didn't know how to escape from. How could this happen? How could my own father turn his back on me when I needed him the most? But that wasn't even the worst of it. He didn't just kick me out with no warning. He did it in the middle of the night, in the coldest part of winter. He threw me out into the snow, telling me to go somewhere else, like I was some kind of stray dog. I had no coat, no bag, nothing but the clothes I was wearing. And the worst part? I had nowhere to go. I don't know how long I stood there in the snow, feeling the cold seep into my bones, feeling the tears freeze on my cheeks. I was terrified. I had no family to turn to, no friends who could help. All I had was this baby growing inside me. A baby that I didn't know how to care for. A baby that I wasn't sure I even wanted. I walked for hours, trying to find shelter, trying to figure out what to do. The streets were empty. The city was asleep, and I was alone. I didn't know where to go. I didn't know who to trust. I ended up in the park, thinking maybe I could find a bench to sleep on, or maybe just somewhere to hide. But it wasn't safe. Not with everything that had happened, not with the way I felt. The fear of being out there alone in the dark, of being hunted by the world and by my own thoughts, was overwhelming. I spent the night in a public bathroom, trying to stay warm, trying to sleep. But it was impossible. I could hear the noise outside, the sounds of people walking by, the whispers of people who didn't know my story. They didn't know I was just a kid, pregnant, alone, with no idea how to survive. I kept my hands on my stomach, feeling the life inside me, knowing that no matter how hard I tried to shut it out, this baby would be here soon, and I would have to face it. By morning, I couldn't stay in the bathroom anymore. It was too dangerous. I knew I had to get out of there before someone found me, before something worse happened. I somehow made my way to the school. The bathroom there felt like a small sanctuary in the chaos. I knew I had to figure something out, but I couldn't. I felt like I was running out of time, like everything was slipping away. That's when I saw her. Miss Taylor, my English teacher. She had always been kind to me, always supportive. She was the one teacher who never gave up on me, who believed I had potential, who told me time and time again that I could write my way out of this town if I just kept going. But I never really believed her. I couldn't see a way out of the life I was stuck in. But that day, that moment, something changed. Miss Taylor looked at me, really looked at me, and saw the brokenness in my eyes. She saw the fear and the hopelessness. She didn't ask questions. She didn't judge me. She just reached out, pulling me into her arms. And I cried. I cried harder than I ever thought possible, letting go of all the pain I had been holding inside. I cried because I was scared. I cried because I didn't know how to do this alone. I cried because I had nobody left. And yet, she was there. She didn't have to be, but she was. She didn't say a word. She just wrapped her arms around me. And in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in what seemed like forever. Safe. I felt safe. "You're coming home with me," she said, her voice steady and calm. She didn't give me the chance to argue or resist. She just made the decision for me, and I was too exhausted to fight it. She took me home with her that day, canceling all her plans. It was a gesture of kindness that was so foreign to me, so unlike anything I'd ever known. She drove me to her house, and I cried the whole way there. I couldn't help it. I didn't know how to deal with this kindness. I wasn't used to it. When we arrived at her house, it was so different from what I was used to. It was quiet, peaceful, full of books and the sound of cats purring. Miss Taylor lived alone, but her house felt like it was filled with life. She led me to a room that she had set up for me in her office. She didn't ask me questions. She just told me I could rest and that everything would be okay. For the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to believe that maybe things could get better. Maybe I wasn't as alone as I thought. The next few days felt like a blur. Miss Taylor took me to the doctor's appointments, the ones I had been avoiding for so long. She held my hand during each visit, never once making me feel ashamed or embarrassed. Nurses would mistake her for my mother, and we never corrected them. It felt easier that way. They treated me with kindness, but Miss Taylor was the one who made me feel like I mattered. And at night, when the morning sickness hit, when my body rejected everything I tried to hold down, Miss Taylor would hold my hair back. She would tell me stories about her wife, Marina, who had passed away years ago. Marina had been her soulmate, and they had always wanted children. They had tried for years to have kids, but time had run out for them. I remember Miss Taylor telling me, "Maybe you and your baby are my second chance." And at that moment, I realized that maybe I could make this work. Maybe I could love this baby, even though the way it all started wasn't the way I had planned. But Miss Taylor, with all her wisdom and love, made me believe it was possible. As the weeks passed, I started to settle into this new life. Miss Taylor was there for me every step of the way. She would tell the baby stories in different languages, teach it about the books they would read together, and I began to feel a connection to this little life growing inside me. Maybe, just maybe, I could love it, even if I wasn't sure how. I had gone from being a scared, homeless teenager to someone who was starting to believe in the possibility of a family. It wasn't the family I had once imagined, but it was a family all the same. And for the first time, I felt like I had a chance at a future. As the weeks turned into months, the days began to blur into a routine. A routine I never thought I'd have, but one that felt more real and comforting than anything I had experienced before. Living with Miss Taylor was different. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't easy, but it was filled with something I hadn't realized I'd been craving for years: love, patience, and the feeling of being seen. I spent my days doing online schoolwork, something that seemed trivial at first, but now felt like an anchor to my sense of self. It kept me from drowning in my thoughts, kept me from sinking deeper into the weight of my situation. And while I worked on my assignments, Miss Taylor would be there, grading papers or reading her books, offering encouragement whenever I needed it. It was clear that Miss Taylor wasn't just teaching me about English or history, she was teaching me about life. She would talk to me about the world, about the things she had learned through her own struggles. I could see the way she smiled when she spoke of Marina, her wife, and I could feel the love that had been there. Even though Marina was gone, she still carried that love with her. It was something that Miss Taylor gave to me without asking for anything in return. I started to realize that what I had thought was a mistake was slowly turning into something more. My life, my whole outlook, was shifting. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. It wasn't about hiding from the world or pretending things weren't happening. I was starting to feel like I had a purpose, even if it wasn't the one I had planned. There were days when the weight of it all felt too heavy. Days when the nausea would hit so hard I couldn't even get out of bed. When the anxiety of being pregnant at such a young age threatened to consume me. But Miss Taylor was always there. She was a constant, a steady presence that I had never known before. She would sit with me while I cried, telling me everything would be okay, even when I wasn't sure if it would be. And as my belly grew, so did my sense of responsibility. There was a baby inside me, a real, live baby, and it was my job to take care of it. The thought of being a mother terrified me at first, but slowly, over time, I started to imagine what it might be like. Miss Taylor made me believe that I could do it. She made me feel like I wasn't alone, even when the world outside seemed to think I was nothing more than a mistake. There were nights when the loneliness crept in, when I missed my family, even though they had abandoned me. I would think about my father, how he had thrown me out, how he had turned his back on me when I needed him the most. And there were moments when I felt the sting of that abandonment, but they didn't hurt as much as they used to. I had Miss Taylor now, and for the first time, I felt like I had someone who cared about me, someone who wanted to help me heal. One of the hardest things to process was the loss of my own family. I had never really understood what family meant until I saw Miss Taylor and her stories about Marina. They had built a life together, a life filled with love and memories. And even though Miss Taylor's heart was broken after Marina's death, She never stopped loving. She had room in her heart for me, even when I didn't believe I deserved it. I was beginning to see that family wasn't just about blood. It wasn't about who you were born to. It was about the people who choose to love you, who choose to support you, who choose to be there when you need them most. That was the kind of family Miss Taylor had shown me. She had taken me in without hesitation, without judgment, and that was something I could never repay. It was a gift I had never expected, but one that meant more than anything else in the world. And then, one night, something shifted. It was a quiet moment, but one that I will never forget. I was sitting in the living room, working on a school assignment, when Miss Taylor came in and sat beside me. She had a cup of tea in her hands, and she looked at me with a softness in her eyes that I had never seen before. "You know," she said, her voice gentle, "you're going to be a great mother." The words hit me harder than I expected. I had never heard anyone say that to me before, especially not with the kind of sincerity Miss Taylor had in her voice. It made me pause, made me think about everything I had been through. I wasn't perfect. I wasn't ready for all of this. But maybe, just maybe, I could be the kind of mother my baby needed. Maybe I didn't need to be perfect. Maybe all I needed was to try. "I don't feel ready," I confessed, looking down at the paper in front of me. "I don't know how I'm supposed to do this. How do I even start?" Miss Taylor smiled, a kind, knowing smile. "You start by doing the best you can. Every day, you try your best. And when you don't have all the answers, you lean on the people who care about you. Like me." And in that moment, I realized something important. I wasn't alone in this. I didn't have to figure everything out on my own. I had Miss Taylor. I had someone who believed in me. Someone who was showing me what it meant to truly care for someone else, even when I wasn't sure how to care for myself. The next day, something incredible happened. I had been struggling with my schoolwork, feeling overwhelmed, unable to focus. But Miss Taylor, being Miss Taylor, didn't just let me spiral. She gave me space to breathe, but also gently encouraged me to keep pushing forward. "One step at a time," she would say. "You don't have to have all the answers, but you do need to keep moving forward." It was that day when I finally started to believe her. I started to believe that maybe I could keep going, that maybe I could be the kind of mother my baby deserved. A few weeks later, I found myself sitting in a doctor's office, my nerves on edge, waiting for the ultrasound. The sound of the heart beating, the tiny flicker of movement on the screen, made everything feel real. It was no longer just a hypothetical situation. There was a baby inside me, a life that was growing, a life that I was responsible for. Miss Taylor had promised she would be there with me, and she was. She held my hand through the whole appointment, offering quiet words of encouragement as the nurse showed us the heartbeat, the tiny body curled up inside of me. I remember feeling something I had never felt before. It wasn't just fear, it was hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, I could do this. And when the doctor left the room, Miss Taylor looked at me, her eyes bright with tears. "You're going to be a great mom. I know it." And for the first time, I believed her. As the weeks passed, things began to settle into a rhythm. The early days of shock, confusion, and fear were slowly replaced by a sense of determination that I had never felt before. It wasn't an easy process, but there was something reassuring in the routine. It was like learning how to walk again after having been knocked down so many times. Miss Taylor had a way of making everything seem possible. When I doubted myself, she was there to remind me that I wasn't alone. She wasn't just a teacher. She had become my lifeline, the one person who saw beyond the mistakes, beyond the past. She saw me, really saw me, and in doing so, she helped me see myself in a different light. The baby, my baby, was growing stronger every day. I could feel it now. The little flutters, the way it seemed to kick and move around inside me. At first, I wasn't sure what to make of it. I had spent so long dreading the pregnancy, fearing the future, that I hadn't allowed myself to imagine what it would be like to be a mother. But now, I couldn't deny it. There was something beautiful, something sacred about the life inside me. There were moments when I would sit quietly in my room, just feeling the baby's movements, wondering what it would be like to hold it, to see its face for the first time. The thought was terrifying and exciting all at once. How could I possibly be ready for this? I still didn't have all the answers, and I was sure there would be days when I would feel completely overwhelmed. But with Miss Taylor by my side, I started to think that maybe I could handle it. Maybe I could be the mother this baby needed. School was still a struggle. I had my moments when I felt like I was falling behind, like I couldn't keep up. It wasn't easy to focus on assignments when there were so many things pulling at my mind. The future, the baby, the pressure to somehow make it despite everything. I would get frustrated when things didn't come easily, but Miss Taylor was always there to remind me that this wasn't a race. "You don't have to get it perfect," she would say. "You just have to keep trying." I can't explain how much her words meant to me. For the first time in my life, I felt like someone believed in me. It wasn't just about grades or school. It was about me as a person. She believed that I could do something with my life, even if it didn't look like anyone else's. And slowly, over time, I started to believe it too. One of the most unexpected changes was the growing bond between Miss Taylor and the baby. It was as if she had already claimed a part in this new chapter of my life, and I wasn't sure how to feel about it. On one hand, I was grateful. I didn't know what I was doing, and her guidance meant the world to me. But on the other hand, it was hard not to feel a pang of sadness every time she rubbed my belly, every time she spoke to the baby in her gentle voice, telling it stories, teaching it words in different languages. I didn't have a mother who cared for me like that. My own mother had never been there when I needed her most, and the thought of someone else filling that role felt strange. But Miss Taylor wasn't trying to take anything away from me. She was simply offering what she had, and that was something I could never take for granted. It wasn't just about the physical care she provided. It was emotional, too. She was there when I couldn't handle the weight of my own thoughts. She was there when I cried about the future, about the fear of being a single mother, about the things I had no control over. I had never known someone could care for me like that, without question, without hesitation. As the days turned into months, I started to feel a shift in myself. I wasn't the same scared, hopeless girl who had been thrown out into the cold. I had grown stronger, even though I hadn't noticed it happening. There were still tough days, still moments of doubt, but I was beginning to see a future with my baby. One of the most difficult things to face was the reality of my past. My father, who had kicked me out without a second thought, had not tried to reach out, had not tried to make amends. It hurt. Deep down, knowing that the man who should have been my protector, my father, was the one who had abandoned me when I needed him most. The memories of the night he threw me out were still vivid in my mind. The cold, the fear, the sense of being unwanted. But despite that, I had to face the truth. I didn't need his approval anymore. I had built something new, something worth fighting for. The baby inside me and the life I was creating with Miss Taylor were far more important than the rejection I had faced. I had a family now, one that I had chosen, one that had chosen me in return. It was on one of those days when everything seemed to come together that I realized how much Miss Taylor had become a mother to me. She had already become a grandmother of sorts to the baby, even though the baby wasn't even born yet. I watched her as she spoke to my stomach, telling the baby about all the things it would see, about the books it would read, about the places it would go. It was a strange feeling watching someone else care for the baby, but also knowing that it was coming from a place of love, a place of wanting to give. I had no idea what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, I wasn't scared. I wasn't alone. I had someone who cared, and that made all the difference. There was a sense of peace in the house now. The chaos of my life had been replaced by a quiet kind of joy, a joy that was born from the love Miss Taylor had given me, and the hope that maybe, just maybe, I could make it. There would still be challenges ahead raising a child, surviving without the support I had once hoped for, and finding my place in a world that hadn't always been kind to me. But I had Miss Taylor, and that meant everything. As the months went by, I found myself feeling a little more settled, though the reality of what was coming, what was inevitable, never seemed to get any easier. The days that once felt like a blur of uncertainty and fear slowly transformed into something I could handle, but that didn't mean everything was perfect. Not by a long shot. There were still days when I woke up in a cold sweat, anxiety gnawing at my insides, unsure of how to face what lay ahead. But those days were fewer now, and they were always followed by moments of clarity and strength that I hadn't known I was capable of. Pregnancy wasn't exactly the kind of experience I had ever dreamed of. It wasn't all glowing skin, joy, and anticipation. No, it was more like a battleground between my emotions and my body, constantly changing, constantly reminding me that this wasn't what I had planned. The morning sickness came and went in waves. There were days when I could barely eat anything, and others when I couldn't keep food down at all. I was exhausted, physically drained from the weight I carried not just from the baby, but from the circumstances I had found myself in. But as the baby grew inside me, something else began to grow too. It wasn't just the obvious physical changes, my belly rounding out, my body showing signs of the life inside me. It was something deeper. It was a sense of purpose. There was a tiny person depending on me, and even though I was scared, I started to feel a sense of pride in that. I was going to be a mother, a real mother, the kind of mother I never had, and I was determined to do everything I could to give my child a better life. It was funny, though. The further along I got, the more I realized how much I had taken for granted. For so long, I had been focused on the things I lacked: family, support, stability, and I had forgotten to appreciate the things I did have. Miss Taylor, for one. She wasn't my biological mother, but in so many ways, she had become my rock. She had shown me what it meant to be loved unconditionally, what it meant to give without expecting anything in return. She had become everything I had needed in a mother, everything I had wanted, and she did it without any hesitation. I started to see that family wasn't just about bloodlines. It wasn't about the people who were supposed to love you. It was about the people who actually did love you, the ones who stayed when everything else fell apart. And Miss Taylor had stayed. She was the one who took me in when I had nowhere else to go. She was the one who comforted me when I cried, who laughed with me when I found something funny, who cheered me on when I made even the smallest progress. And the strangest part of it all? She wasn't just helping me. She was helping the baby too. There were so many times when she would talk to my stomach, telling the baby how much it was already loved, how many stories it would hear, how many places it would go. It was a strange feeling, watching someone else speak to the baby, knowing that they weren't even related. Yet the love between them was real. It made me realize just how much Miss Taylor had already become a part of this new family I was creating. As the baby's due date neared, the reality of what was happening began to hit me harder than I expected. I had no idea how to care for a newborn. I had never changed a diaper, never fed a baby, never done any of the things that came with being a parent. And the thought of it terrified me. What if I wasn't good enough? What if I made mistakes that I couldn't fix? But Miss Taylor was there, as always, offering calm reassurance. "You're going to be great," she would say. "You don't need to have it all figured out. We'll figure it out together." And for the first time, I started to believe her. Maybe I didn't have to have all the answers. Maybe, just maybe, it was okay to not know everything. It was okay to take it one day at a time. I remember the night I went into labor. It wasn't something I had expected to feel ready for, but somehow, there I was, sitting in Miss Taylor's living room, the contractions coming harder and faster. My hands shook as I gripped the edge of the couch, and I felt this surge of panic rise in my chest. This was it. This was the moment that everything would change. But Miss Taylor, as always, stayed calm. She had been through this before, though not in the same way. She had been a part of Marina's life, a life filled with love and hope, and she was determined to be there for me, just as she had been there for every other part of my journey. She didn't make me feel like I was a burden. She didn't make me feel like I was ruining her life. She just quietly took charge, helping me through each contraction, making sure I had everything I needed. "We're in this together," she said, her voice steady, but filled with warmth. And when we finally got to the hospital, when the doctors confirmed that I was in active labor, I felt something I hadn't felt in so long. I felt like I could do this. I was going to bring my baby into this world, and I wasn't alone. The labor wasn't easy. It was long, and it was painful. And there were moments when I wasn't sure how much more I could take. But Miss Taylor was there, holding my hand, whispering words of encouragement, never once leaving my side. And when the baby finally arrived, when I held him in my arms for the first time, everything changed. He was small, fragile, but perfect in every way. I looked at his tiny face and felt an overwhelming rush of love, a love so deep, so primal, that it took my breath away. I had created this life. This little person was mine. And in that moment, everything, every fear, every doubt, every question I had melted away. Miss Taylor was there, just as she had promised. She cut the umbilical cord, and I watched as she held my son in her arms for the first time. I could see the tears in her eyes, and I knew that, in her own way, she was as proud as I was. She had helped me bring this little life into the world, and now, we would raise him together. "Can he call you Grandma?" I asked, my voice shaky as I looked at Miss Taylor, knowing that she had become so much more than a teacher to me. She smiled through her tears and kissed the baby's tiny forehead. "Yes," she whispered, "he can call me Grandma." And in that moment, I realized something I hadn't known before. Family wasn't just about who you were born to. It was about who you chose to love, who chose to love you back. And Miss Taylor, the woman who had saved me when I had nothing, had now become my family. She was my family. And this little boy, this beautiful little boy, was the most incredible thing I had ever created. The days that followed were a blur of sleepless nights, exhaustion, and overwhelming joy. The reality of motherhood was harder than I had imagined, but it was also more beautiful than I could have ever dreamed. And Miss Taylor was right there, helping me every step of the way. Oliver, my son, was growing, and so was my understanding of what family really meant. It was a choice, not just a bloodline. And I had found the family I had always longed for. The first few weeks after Oliver was born were a blur. I remember them in flashes, moments of sleep deprivation, moments of joy, moments of overwhelming love. I had imagined being a mother in so many different ways, But the reality was far more complex than I could have ever expected. There were days when everything seemed impossible, when Oliver wouldn't stop crying, when I felt like I was failing, when I had no idea what I was doing. But then there were the moments when everything felt perfect. When I held him in my arms, when he looked up at me with those tiny, trusting eyes, and the world suddenly felt like it made sense. Miss Taylor was there through all of it. I couldn't have asked for a better support system. She had become a second mother to Oliver, even though she wasn't his biological grandmother. Every morning, she would come in to check on us, her gentle voice always making me feel like I wasn't alone. She would sing to him, telling him stories, teaching him words in different languages. Oliver was growing so fast, and it felt like he was already starting to understand her in some way. He would reach for her glasses, giggling as he touched them, and I could see the bond forming between them. It was a bond that I never expected, but one that felt so right. I had always thought of family as something defined by blood, but now, as I watched Miss Taylor with Oliver, I began to understand that family was so much more than that. It wasn't about shared genes or inherited traits. It was about who was there for you, who supported you, who loved you unconditionally. Miss Taylor had done all of that for me, and now, she was doing it for Oliver too. We had a routine now, something that felt comforting in its predictability. Mornings were spent in a sleepy haze, with Oliver squirming in my arms, needing his first feeding of the day. Miss Taylor would bring us tea and toast, sitting with us for a while, chatting about her day, about the things she had learned, about the things she hoped for. She would laugh and tell stories about the students she had taught over the years, stories that were full of warmth and affection. It felt like I was starting to create a life here, a life that I hadn't known was possible. There were still difficult moments, though. There were days when I missed my family. I missed the idea of a family, the idea of having parents who were there for me. I missed the idea of having a mother who would help me with Oliver, who would show me the ropes of motherhood, who would be there when I was too tired or too overwhelmed to keep going. But Miss Taylor was always there. She was the mother I never had, and in many ways, she was the mother Oliver needed. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't always perfect, but it was enough. More than enough. I started to realize that family was something you could build, piece by piece. It wasn't about who you were born to. It wasn't about the bloodlines or the people who failed you. It was about the people who chose to be there, who showed up when it mattered. Miss Taylor was one of those people. She had chosen me. She had chosen Oliver. And that was enough to create a family, even if it wasn't the one I had imagined. One day, a few months after Oliver was born, something happened that I wasn't prepared for. It wasn't a dramatic event, nothing that would change everything at once. But it was a moment that forced me to confront the reality of what had happened in my life, and it made me realize how far I had come. I had gotten a call from my father. I hadn't spoken to him since he threw me out, and I had no desire to. But when the phone rang that day, I knew it was him. I hesitated for a long time before answering, unsure of what to say, unsure of what he even wanted. But when I finally picked up, his voice was cold, as usual. He told me that my mother was dying of guilt and that she wanted to meet Oliver. He said that I should come home and apologize for all the shame I had caused, that maybe we could work things out if I did. I felt a surge of anger rise in me, but I kept my voice steady. He was trying to manipulate me, trying to make me feel guilty for something that wasn't my fault. But I wasn't that scared girl anymore. I wasn't the one who would cower in the face of his anger. I had a son now. I had a family, a real family, and I would protect them at all costs. I'm not coming home, I told him, my voice firm. And you don't get to tell me what to do anymore. I have a family now. A family that actually loves me. He didn't say much after that. There were a few more words, a few more attempts to guilt me into returning, but I wasn't listening anymore. I had Miss Taylor, and I had Oliver. That was all I needed. The next morning, Miss Taylor found me sitting on the porch, my phone still in my hand. I hadn't even realized I was holding it so tightly until she sat down beside me. She didn't ask me about the phone call. She just sat there, her presence comforting, like she always was. You did the right thing, she said, her voice quiet but full of understanding. I nodded, feeling the weight of the decision settle in my chest. I had finally let go of the idea of trying to win my father's approval. It wasn't something I had expected to do so soon, but it felt like the right time. I wasn't going to waste my energy on someone who had never cared for me in the way I needed. You've built a family, and that's what matters, Miss Taylor continued. Your family isn't about what they've given you, but about what you've built. And you've built something beautiful. Her words stayed with me long after she had gone inside. She was right. I had built a family. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. It was a family that I had chosen. A family that had chosen me. And that was more than I could have ever hoped for. As the days turned into weeks, I watched Oliver grow. Watched him learn new things every day. He would giggle at Miss Taylor's silly faces, reach out to touch her glasses, and, as he got older, start to speak his first words. I would watch him, my heart swelling with love, and I would think about how much he had changed my life. I had gone from being scared and alone to being a mother, a real mother, and I had someone who loved me through it all. I wasn't the same girl I had been when I first came to Miss Taylor's house. I had been broken then, lost in a world that didn't seem to care. But now, I had a future. I had a purpose. I had a family. And for the first time in my life, I knew that I was enough. Life seemed to continue in a steady, predictable rhythm. But there were still moments when I would catch myself wondering how I got here. How had I gone from being homeless and pregnant at 16 to sitting on the porch of Miss Taylor's house, holding my son in my arms, watching the world go by? The transition from fear to peace, from despair to hope, wasn't something I could explain easily. It had happened in small, quiet moments. Each day had brought something new, some small victory, some new way of learning how to love myself and those around me. Oliver, at 6 months old, had started to become this little person, full of curiosity and wonder, always reaching for new things, always exploring. It was amazing to watch him grow, even as I still sometimes felt like I was stumbling my way through motherhood. But every day, I felt a little more confident, a little more sure of my ability to take care of him. What I hadn't expected, though, was how much I would change in the process. Motherhood had a way of doing that. It forced you to look at yourself in ways you never had before. It wasn't just about the baby. It was about what the baby represented. Oliver wasn't just my child. He was my future. He was my chance to break the cycle, to build a life that was better than the one I had known. He was the reason I woke up every morning, the reason I kept pushing forward, even on the hard days. Miss Taylor was still there, of course. She had become not just a mentor, but a true second mother to me. Her support was unwavering, and every day, she reminded me that I was doing a good job, even when I felt like I wasn't. When I struggled, she was there. When I doubted myself, she was there. She helped me navigate those first sleepless nights, showing me how to soothe Oliver when he cried, how to feed him, how to comfort him. I had never learned any of these things before, but with Miss Taylor's help, I was beginning to understand what it meant to be a mother, to care for someone who depended on me. We spent hours together, talking about everything and nothing. Miss Taylor would tell me stories about her time with Marina, and I would share my own experiences about what it was like to be pregnant, about what I was feeling now as a mother. We laughed together, and we cried together, and in the process, we built a bond that I never expected. She had always been there for me, but now it felt like we were a team. We weren't just two people trying to survive. We were a family, a chosen family, one that had grown out of pain but was built on love and trust. But even with all the love and support in my life, there were still moments when the weight of everything would feel too much to bear. It wasn't just the late nights or the exhaustion. It was the constant reminder of the family I didn't have, the family that had never been there when I needed them most. My father's call had left an imprint on me that I couldn't shake. It was the guilt, the manipulation, the empty promises of reconciliation. I still hadn't forgiven him for what he did, and I wasn't sure if I ever would. But what haunted me most was how easy it had been for him to turn his back on me. It wasn't just the rejection. It was the realization that someone who should have loved me unconditionally had chosen not to. I knew I couldn't let that define me, but the scars from that rejection ran deep. I wasn't sure how to erase them or even if I could. But every time I saw Oliver smile, every time I felt his tiny hand reach for mine, I was reminded of why I had to let go of the past. I wasn't going to let my son grow up in a world where rejection was the norm. I was going to give him something better. I was going to make sure he knew what real love was, what it meant to be part of a family that chose each other every day, no matter the circumstances. Miss Taylor, who had already given me more than I could ever repay, became even more important to me during this time. I started to realize that it wasn't just about what she had done for me in the past. It was about what we were building together in the present and how we were shaping the future. I watched her with Oliver, how she would sing him songs in different languages, how she would play with him, her face lighting up every time he smiled. It wasn't just because she had nothing else to do. It was because she loved him, and, as I sat back and watched, I realized something else. She had become my family too. There were moments when I would wonder about what my life would have been like if things had been different. If my father had been the father I had imagined, if my mother had been there for me, if everything hadn't fallen apart. But then I would look at Oliver, look at Miss Taylor, and realize that none of that mattered. The past couldn't define my future. What mattered was the family I was creating now, with the people who loved me and who I loved in return. I had never known a love like this, A love that wasn't bound by blood, but by choice, by loyalty, by trust. And that love, that unwavering commitment to each other, was what made our family stronger than anything I had known before. It wasn't always easy, of course. There were days when I felt like I was failing, days when the weight of everything seemed too heavy to carry. But Miss Taylor was always there to remind me that I wasn't alone, that we were in this together. And slowly, over time, I started to realize that maybe I wasn't failing at all. I was just doing the best I could, and that was enough. And one day, as I sat on the couch with Oliver, watching him play with his favorite toys, I realized that I was happy. I wasn't perfect, I didn't have everything figured out, but I was happy. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was in control of my own life. And it was because of the family I had built with Miss Taylor, because of the love and support we shared, that I could finally see a future. A future where I wasn't defined by my past, where I wasn't just a victim of circumstance. It was a future I had created for myself, with Oliver, with Miss Taylor, and with the family that we had chosen. And for the first time, I was no longer afraid of what would come next. Whatever the future held, I knew I could handle it, because I had found something that I had never thought possible: belonging. As the months went by, life felt both familiar and new. The early days of motherhood, the ones filled with sleepless nights and constant worry, slowly began to feel more manageable. Oliver was growing quickly, as babies do, and each milestone he reached was both a victory and a reminder of how much I had changed. I was no longer the scared teenager who had been kicked out of her home. I was a mother, and that fact was becoming more real every single day. Miss Taylor had been right all along. Everything was going to be okay. Not perfect, but okay. There were still moments when I felt overwhelmed, moments when I doubted myself and wondered if I was doing enough for Oliver. But those moments were fewer, and they didn't have the power to consume me like they used to. The love I had for my son, and the love I felt from Miss Taylor, kept me grounded. Every time Oliver smiled, every time he reached out for me, I knew I was doing the right thing. I knew I was enough. One of the things that surprised me most was how much I enjoyed being a mother. I had always thought I would struggle with it after all. I had never really had any role models. But now, watching Oliver grow, I realized that love could teach you how to be a parent. And I had more than enough love to give. Miss Taylor was still my rock. I couldn't have done it without her. She had become more than just a teacher or a guardian. She was my family, my support, my friend. She helped me navigate the complexities of motherhood, offering advice when I asked for it, but always respecting my ability to make decisions on my own. She never pushed me, but she was always there, a constant presence of reassurance. There were still moments when I had to confront the reality of my past. I thought about my father and my mother, about how they had abandoned me when I needed them most. I thought about all the things I had never received from them: love, support, understanding. I thought about how I had been thrown out of my home, left to fend for myself, with no one to turn to. Those memories still haunted me, but they didn't define me anymore. The family I had found with Miss Taylor and Oliver was what mattered now. It was what I was building, and it was the foundation of everything I would do in the future. I realized, too, that healing from the past didn't mean forgetting it. It didn't mean pretending that the pain and the abandonment hadn't happened, but it did mean learning how to move forward. It meant accepting that I couldn't change what had happened, but I could control how I lived now. And now, I was living with purpose. I had a son who needed me, and I had Miss Taylor, who had chosen to be part of my life. That was all I needed. There was a day, about a year after Oliver was born, when something unexpected happened. I was at the grocery store with Oliver, pushing him in the cart, when I saw someone I hadn't expected to see. It was my mother. She was standing in the produce aisle, looking through the apples, her back to me. At first, I wasn't sure if it was really her. It had been so long since I had seen her, since I had heard her voice. She had never been the kind of mother I needed, but seeing her there, in front of me, brought a rush of emotions I wasn't prepared for. I froze for a moment, unsure of what to do. I could feel my heart racing, and I suddenly felt like a teenager again, the one who had been thrown out into the snow, abandoned, alone. But then I remembered how far I had come. I remembered Miss Taylor, and I remembered Oliver, and I knew that I wasn't that scared girl anymore. I was stronger now. I had built something real, something that couldn't be broken by the past. "Mom?" I said, my voice tentative but firm. She turned around slowly, her eyes widening when she saw me. There was a flicker of recognition in her eyes, but it quickly faded into something else, something I couldn't quite read. She looked older, more worn, as though the years had taken their toll on her in ways I hadn't expected. She didn't look like the mother I had once hoped for. She didn't look like the woman I had dreamed of, but there she was, standing in front of me. I didn't think I'd see you here," she said, her voice shaky. I nodded, unsure of what to say. The silence between us felt heavy, filled with all the years of distance, of pain, of things left unsaid. I didn't know what I expected from this encounter. Maybe I thought I would feel some kind of closure, some sense of understanding. But all I felt was confusion. I wasn't the same person I had been when I left her. I wasn't the same girl who had hoped for her love, her approval. I've been thinking about you, she said, her voice faltering. About everything. I didn't know how to respond to that. The words seemed meaningless to me now. What do you want? I asked, my voice steady but cold. She looked down at the ground for a moment, as though searching for the right words. I don't know, she said softly. I want to see him. Your son. I want to meet him. The words hit me harder than I expected. Part of me wanted to say no, wanted to tell her that she didn't get to just waltz back into my life after everything she had done. But another part of me, the part that was still carrying all the pain and longing of my childhood, wanted to believe that maybe this could be different. Maybe she could be different. I looked down at Oliver, who was happily playing with his toy in the cart, completely unaware of the conversation unfolding between us. He was my world now. He was the reason I had the strength to face the past, to confront the people who had hurt me. He was the future I was building. You can meet him, I said slowly, my voice firm. But it will be on my terms. You don't get to just walk back into my life without earning it. She nodded, her eyes brimming with tears. I understand. I didn't know what would come of this encounter. I didn't know if this would lead to anything meaningful or if it was just another step toward closure. But what I did know was this. I had come a long way. I wasn't the same girl I had been. I was stronger. I was a mother. And I would never let my past define who I was or what my future would look like. As I left the store with Oliver, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. Whatever happened with my mother, I knew that I had already created the family I needed. I had Miss Taylor. I had Oliver. And together, we were enough. The days after I saw my mother in the grocery store were a whirlwind of emotions. I couldn't shake the memory of her standing there, the look in her eyes as she asked to meet Oliver. I had gone from not thinking about her at all to being faced with this complex situation. My mind kept replaying the conversation, trying to make sense of it, but no matter how much I thought about it, I couldn't reach a decision. At first, I told myself it didn't matter, that I had moved on, built a life without her, and that her appearance meant nothing in the grand scheme of things. But as the days went on, I realized I was lying to myself. It did matter. It mattered because it was a reminder of the past I had worked so hard to forget. The part of me that I had buried deep inside, the part that still hoped for a mother who would care, who would show up when it counted. But I couldn't afford to go back to that. I couldn't afford to let the possibility of something that might never be the kind of relationship I needed distract me from the family I had now. The family I had built. I had a son, and I had Miss Taylor, and that was more than enough. Oliver was my priority now. It wasn't just about protecting him from the past. It was about showing him what true love looked like. I wanted him to grow up in a world where love wasn't conditional, where family wasn't just about blood, but about choosing each other every day. I wanted him to understand that love wasn't something you had to earn. It was something that was freely given, even when you didn't deserve it. I didn't know what I wanted from my mother, or even if I wanted anything at all. But I did know one thing. I wasn't going to let her back into my life unless it was on my terms. And it wasn't going to be about recreating the past. It was going to be about moving forward, whatever that looked like. A few days after the encounter at the store, I sat down with Miss Taylor, something I hadn't done in a while. The house was quiet, the afternoon sun filtering through the windows, and I could tell something was weighing on my mind. Miss Taylor could always tell when something was bothering me. "Everything okay?" she asked, sitting across from me with a cup of tea in her hands. I nodded, though I knew it wasn't entirely true. "It's just my mom," I said quietly. "I saw her the other day. She wants to meet Oliver." Miss Taylor set her cup down, her eyes thoughtful. "How do you feel about that?" "I don't know. Part of me wants to let her, to give her the chance to be what she never was. But I don't know if that's even possible. I don't know if I can trust her." "Do you need to trust her?" Miss Taylor asked gently. "Or do you just need to be sure she won't hurt Oliver?" I paused, the question hanging in the air. I thought about Oliver, his small hands reaching for me every time he needed comfort, the way he trusted me without question, the way he trusted Miss Taylor, the way he needed a stable, loving environment to grow up in. He didn't deserve the pain of a broken relationship, not when he had never experienced that kind of hurt before. "I guess I don't know what I need from her," I said. "But I know I can't risk losing what I have now. I can't let the past ruin everything I've built with Oliver. With you." Miss Taylor smiled, a quiet, understanding smile. You've built something beautiful, and I'm proud of you. You've chosen your family, and that's the most important thing you can do for yourself and for Oliver. I felt the weight of her words settle in my chest, and for the first time in days, I felt a sense of peace. I didn't have to make this decision right away. I didn't have to let my past dictate my future. I could take my time. I could decide what was best for Oliver and me, and I didn't have to do it on anyone's timeline but my own. The next day I called my mother. The call felt surreal, like something out of a dream. I hadn't expected to reach out to her so soon, but there was a part of me that needed closure. There was a part of me that needed to know where we stood, what she was willing to do, and if she even understood the gravity of the situation. I didn't know what I was expecting when I called. Maybe I thought she would apologize. Maybe I thought she would somehow prove to me that she was different, that she could be the mother I had always wanted. But when she answered the phone, her voice was shaky, as if she hadn't expected me to call either. "Hello?" she said, sounding uncertain, like she was afraid of what I might say. "It's me," I said, my voice steady, despite the knot in my stomach. "I've been thinking about what you said the other day, about meeting Oliver." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "I'm sorry for everything, you know," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know I haven't been the mother you needed, and I don't expect you to forgive me, but I want to be a part of your life again, and I want to meet my grandson. I want to make things right." I didn't know how to respond to that. I wasn't sure what making things right even meant anymore. Could she really make up for all the years of abandonment? Could she fix everything with one apology? "I'm not sure what that looks like," I said, taking a deep breath. "I'm not sure if we can just go back to what we had, but I'm willing to talk. I'm willing to give you the chance to prove that you can be there for me, for Oliver." She hesitated, then said, "I understand, and I'll take whatever you can give me. I just want to be a part of your life, even if it's just a small part. I'll think about it," I said softly. "But it won't be easy, and it won't be what you expect." "I know," she replied. "I'm just asking for a chance." And with that, the conversation ended. I didn't know if anything would come of it. I didn't know if my mother could ever be the kind of person I needed. But I also knew that I wasn't the same person I had been. I wasn't that scared girl who had been desperate for love and validation. I had built something real, something strong, and I wasn't going to let anything destroy it. For the first time in my life, I was choosing my own path. I was deciding what my future would look like, and I was doing it for me. And for Oliver, the following weeks were filled with a sense of cautious optimism. I had made the decision to reach out to my mother, but I wasn't rushing into anything. I wasn't ready to open up the floodgates of my past, and I wasn't going to put Oliver in a position where he could be hurt. But I also knew that I needed to take control of this situation. I couldn't keep pretending that the past didn't exist, that I wasn't still carrying the weight of it with me. I had done a lot of work to get to where I was now, and I wasn't about to let anyone disrupt the peace I had found with Miss Taylor and Oliver. The conversation with my mother had left me feeling emotionally drained, but it also gave me clarity. She had apologized, and part of me wanted to believe that she meant it, but part of me was also terrified of getting my hopes up. I didn't know if I could ever forgive her for what she had done, for the years of neglect, for the way she had abandoned me when I needed her most. I didn't know if I could ever trust her again. But at the same time, I didn't want to live in a world where I couldn't at least try to heal some of those wounds. I didn't want to raise Oliver in a home full of resentment and anger, and if there was any chance of moving forward, I had to be willing to at least consider it. I had no idea what kind of relationship my mother and I could have, but I did know one thing. It wouldn't be a quick fix. It wouldn't be an easy road, and it wouldn't be something I did out of obligation. It had to be something that came from a genuine desire to build something better, not just for me, but for Oliver. So, I took my time. I focused on my son, on the small victories of everyday life. I spent my days with Oliver, watching him grow, learning what he liked, what made him laugh, what calmed him when he was upset. He was the center of my world, and I couldn't imagine anything coming between us. Miss Taylor and I continued our routine, one that had become comforting and safe. She was a steady presence in my life, and I could always count on her to help me keep perspective when things felt overwhelming. I would find her reading in the living room, her feet tucked under her, a cup of tea in hand, and I would sit down beside her, telling her everything that was on my mind, and she would listen, offering gentle words of encouragement, reminding me that I was doing the best I could. I had grown used to her being a part of my life in ways I had never imagined. She had become my family in every sense of the word, and sometimes I would look at her and think about how different my life might have been if I had never crossed paths with her. I would never have believed that someone like her would come into my life, someone who cared so deeply and unconditionally for me, even when I hadn't believed I deserved it. But here she was, always there when I needed her, always steady, always kind. I could see how much she loved Oliver too. She wasn't his biological grandmother, but she was everything he needed. She would talk to him in soft tones, teaching him simple words, singing him lullabies at night. He loved to reach for her glasses, always fascinated by how they glinted in the light. It was moments like those moments of pure, innocent joy that made me realize how much I had come to depend on her. One afternoon, I took Oliver for a walk in the park. He was learning to walk now, taking his first shaky steps, reaching for my hands as he tried to balance himself. Miss Taylor had been encouraging me to get out of the house more, to take Oliver out and show him the world beyond the walls of our home. It was good advice, and I had slowly started to take it. We sat on a bench together, the sun shining down on us, Oliver squirming in my lap, his small fingers clutching my shirt. As I watched him, I couldn't help but feel a surge of love for him, a love so deep it almost felt like it was consuming me. This little boy had completely changed my life. He had become my reason for living, my reason for waking up every morning. "He's growing so fast," Miss Taylor said, sitting beside me on the bench, her eyes focused on Oliver. "He's already walking, and before you know it, he'll be running around and making a mess." I chuckled softly, imagining the chaos that would come with that. "I'm not ready for that part yet," I admitted. "He's already too much for me to keep up with sometimes." Miss Taylor smiled, her eyes soft with affection. "You're doing great, you know, you really are." I looked at her, feeling a lump form in my throat. "I don't know if I am. There are days when I feel like I'm just barely holding it together. I feel like I don't know what I'm doing most of the time." "You don't have to have all the answers," she said gently. "You just have to keep showing up, keep loving him the best way you know how. And you are. You're doing more than enough." Her words resonated deep within me. It was a reminder that I didn't have to be perfect. I didn't have to have everything figured out. All I needed to do was keep loving Oliver, keep being there for him. That was enough. "I just don't want to mess him up," I confessed, my voice quiet. "I don't want him to feel like I'm failing him." "You're not failing him," Miss Taylor said firmly. "You're his mother, and that means the world to him. He knows he's loved. He knows he's safe." And in that moment, I realized she was right. Oliver knew he was loved. He had everything he needed. Love, safety, stability. He had me, and he had Miss Taylor. What else could a child need? I took a deep breath, feeling the weight on my shoulders ease a little. "Thank you," I said quietly, "for everything. I don't know what I would do without you." Miss Taylor smiled and patted my hand. "You don't have to thank me. You've done all the hard work. I'm just here to help." We sat in silence for a while, watching Oliver play in the grass, his tiny hands reaching for everything around him. The world felt peaceful in that moment. It felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be, but as much as I was at peace with the life I had built, there was still the matter of my mother. She had asked to meet Oliver, and I hadn't fully made up my mind about what that would look like. I wasn't sure if I could forgive her or if I was ready to let her back into my life. But I also knew that I couldn't live in a state of limbo forever. Eventually, I would have to decide what kind of relationship I wanted to have with her, if any. But for now, I was content. I had built a family of my own, a family that was full of love and support, and that was more than I could have ever imagined. As the weeks passed, I found myself falling into a comfortable rhythm with Oliver and Miss Taylor. I'd wake up to the sound of Oliver's little giggles, a sound so pure and full of joy it immediately brightened my day. Miss Taylor would be there, making us breakfast or reading the newspaper in the kitchen, her calm presence never failing to reassure me that, despite everything I had been through, I was doing okay. Every day felt like a new step forward, a reminder that I was creating the life I had always dreamed of, even if it didn't look like the life I had originally imagined. I had come a long way from that cold night when my father had thrown me out, from the girl who had wandered the streets alone, scared and pregnant, with no one to turn to. Now, I had a son who depended on me, and I had someone in Miss Taylor who was always there for me, helping me navigate the challenges that came with motherhood. There were still days when I felt unsure, days when the weight of responsibility seemed overwhelming, but those days were becoming less frequent. I was growing into my role as a mother, and Oliver was growing up right alongside me, but there were still the moments of doubt, the moments when I couldn't help but wonder about my past. My mother's apology and her request to meet Oliver lingered in my mind. I hadn't answered her yet. Part of me wanted to say yes, to give her the chance to redeem herself, to allow her to meet her grandson. But another part of me was terrified of what that might mean. What if she let me down again? What if she was only interested in him because of what I had become, not because she genuinely wanted to be a part of our lives? I knew I couldn't avoid the situation forever. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about Oliver, and as much as I wanted to shield him from any pain, I knew that at some point, I would have to decide what role my mother would play in his life, if any. But I couldn't rush into it. I had to be sure. I had to be certain that I was doing what was best for him, for us. One afternoon, as I was sitting in the living room with Oliver playing at my feet, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. I wasn't sure where it came from, but it was there, a quiet certainty that had been missing for so long. I looked over at Miss Taylor, who was sitting nearby, reading a book. "Do you ever wonder if we're doing the right thing?" I asked her, the question coming out before I could stop it. She glanced up from her book, her eyes thoughtful. "Do you mean with Oliver, or with your mother?" "Both," I said, my voice a little uncertain. "I mean, sometimes I wonder if I'm making the right choices for him. And with my mother, I just don't know if I'm ready to let her back in." Miss Taylor set her book down, her gaze soft but steady. "The right thing for you and Oliver is to trust yourselves. You've built something beautiful here, and no one can take that away from you. As for your mother, it's okay to take your time. You don't have to do anything you're not ready for." I nodded, grateful for her wisdom, for her understanding. She had always been so calm, so patient, and it was that steadiness that helped me see things more clearly. I didn't have to rush into anything. I didn't have to make any decisions right away. I could take my time and figure out what was best for me, for Oliver, and for the future we were building together. That evening, after putting Oliver to bed, Miss Taylor and I sat outside on the porch, sipping our tea as the sun set behind the trees. It was one of those rare, quiet moments when everything felt peaceful, when the weight of the world seemed to melt away for just a little while. "You've come so far," Miss Taylor said, her voice low and soft. "I'm proud of you, proud of everything you've done." I looked over at her, my heart full. "I couldn't have done it without you." She smiled, a smile that reached her eyes. "You've done it. I've just been lucky enough to be a part of it." And in that moment, I knew she was right. I had done it. I had survived. I had built a life that I was proud of, and I had done it on my own terms. It hadn't been easy, but I had made it through, and now, with Oliver and Miss Taylor by my side, I was starting to believe that anything was possible. The next few days were filled with small moments of joy. Watching Oliver take his first few steps, watching him laugh as Miss Taylor made silly faces, hearing him say, "Mama," for the first time, those were the moments that kept me going. Those were the moments that reminded me that I was doing the right thing. And then, just as I was beginning to settle into this new chapter of my life, I received a message from my mother. It was simple, but it made my heart race. "I'd like to meet Oliver. Whenever you're ready. And this plater, the Raytander to round." I stared at the message for a long time, my thoughts swirling. What did I want from this meeting? Was I ready to let her into our lives? Was I ready to give her the chance to show me that she could be a mother to me and a grandmother to Oliver? I didn't know the answer, but I knew that I had to decide. I couldn't keep putting it off. It was time to face the past head on, to take control of the situation and decide what kind of future I wanted for myself and for Oliver. I put the phone down and looked out the window, watching as the sun dipped below the horizon. The world felt quiet, like it was holding its breath, waiting for me to make my decision. And for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to make a choice, ready to face whatever came next. Because I knew that, no matter what happened, I had built something beautiful. I had built a family, and that was something that no one could ever take away from me. The decision to reach out to my mother wasn't an easy one. It weighed on me for days, pulling at me in ways I couldn't explain. I had always thought I would be the one to walk away from the past, that I would sever ties and move forward with my life, leaving the people who had hurt me behind. But now, with Oliver growing every day and Miss Taylor's steady support, I realized that I wasn't running from my past anymore. I was choosing to face it head on. I still wasn't sure what kind of relationship I could have with my mother. There were so many years of hurt, so much pain that couldn't be undone with a few words. But something inside me told me I had to at least try. If there was any chance that I could heal those wounds, that I could show Oliver the possibility of forgiveness and understanding, then maybe it was worth it. I wasn't doing it for my mother. I was doing it for myself and for my son. After several days of debating, I finally made the decision. I called her. My hand trembled as I pressed the call button, and I felt my heart race as I waited for her to pick up. The sound of her voice when she answered felt distant, almost like it was coming from another lifetime. "Hello?" "Hi," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "It's me. I think we should meet." There was a brief pause on the other end, and I could almost hear the relief in her voice when she spoke again. "I'd really like that. Thank you." I didn't know what I was expecting from this meeting. I didn't know if I was ready to open that door, to let her back into my life in any capacity. But at that moment, I knew it was the right decision. It was time to take that first step, no matter how uncertain it felt. We agreed to meet at a small cafe in town, somewhere neutral, where we wouldn't be bombarded by the memories of our past. I spent the days leading up to the meeting in a haze of anticipation and nervous energy. I wasn't sure if I was doing the right thing, but I kept reminding myself that I had to trust my instincts, that I had to take control of my own narrative. The day of the meeting, I had a hard time getting out of bed. I wasn't sure why it felt so difficult, but it was like a heavy weight had settled on my chest, making every move feel like a struggle. I knew I had to go, though. I had made the commitment to face my past, and that meant showing up, no matter how much it scared me. Oliver was with Miss Taylor that morning, and I felt a pang of guilt for leaving him behind. But I knew that Miss Taylor would take care of him, just like she always had. She was his second mother, and I trusted her more than anyone else in the world. As I looked in the mirror before leaving the house, I took a deep breath and reminded myself that I had come so far. I had built a life for myself and my son. I didn't need anyone's approval to validate that. The cafe was small, cozy, and warm, with soft lighting and quiet conversations in the background. It felt like a safe place, a place where I could control the situation. When I saw my mother sitting at a corner table, her hands folded nervously in front of her, my heart skipped a beat. She looked older, more tired, but there was something in her eyes, something I hadn't seen before. Regret, maybe? Or maybe it was just fear. Fear of facing what she had done to me, to our family. She stood up as I approached, her movements slow, almost hesitant. I could see that she was trying to gauge my reaction, unsure of how I would respond to her. I could feel the tension between us, thick and uncomfortable, like it had been building up for years, and now it was finally coming to a head. "Hi," I said, my voice shaky but determined. "It's good to see you," I stated. My mother looked at me for a long moment before she spoke. "It's good to see you too," she said quietly. "I've been thinking about you, about everything." I sat down across from her, my hands clenched tightly in my lap. "I've been thinking about it too," I replied. "About everything. About why you didn't show up when I needed you. Why you left me." She looked down at the table, unable to meet my eyes. "I know," she said softly. "I know I failed you, and I'm sorry. I can never undo the things I did, but I want you to know that I'm sorry for all of it, for everything." Her apology hit me harder than I expected. I had spent so many years waiting for this moment, wishing that one day she would take responsibility for what she had done. But now that it was here, I wasn't sure how to react. Part of me wanted to lash out, to demand answers, to make her feel the weight of the years she had abandoned me. But another part of me just wanted to let it go, to forgive her and move on. "I don't know if I can forgive you," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Not yet. It's going to take time. And I don't know if I'll ever be able to forget what you did." She nodded, her eyes filling with tears. "I understand. I don't expect you to forgive me right away. I just want you to know that I'm here. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make things right. I want to meet Oliver. I want to be a part of his life, if you'll let me." Her words hung in the air between us. I could see that she was sincere, that she truly wanted to be a part of my life, of Oliver's life. But the question still lingered. Could I trust her? Could I let her into Oliver's life after everything she had done? "I don't know if I'm ready for that," I said slowly, my heart heavy with uncertainty. "But I'm willing to take it slow. I'm willing to try, but you have to understand that this is going to be on my terms. I'm not going to just forget everything that happened, but I'm willing to give you a chance. If you're serious about making things right, then we'll see where this goes." My mother nodded, her face a mixture of relief and regret. "I understand, and I'll be patient. I'll wait as long as it takes. I just want a chance to prove that I can be there for you, for Oliver." I wasn't sure where this would lead. I wasn't sure if this would be the beginning of a new chapter or just another false hope. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had some control over the situation. I was no longer the scared girl, unsure of where to turn. I had built a life for myself, a life I was proud of, and now I was deciding what role my mother would play in it, if any. We talked for a little while longer, the conversation awkward at times, but civil. We talked about Oliver, about my life now, about the things that had changed. When I finally stood to leave, my heart felt lighter than it had in years. I didn't know what would happen next, but for the first time, I felt like I was in control of my own narrative, and that was enough. The days after my meeting with my mother felt like a strange kind of limbo. It wasn't exactly closure, but it wasn't the unresolved tension that had weighed on me for so long either. It was somewhere in between an uneasy truce, a tentative step toward a future I still wasn't sure I wanted. I didn't feel any great rush to introduce my mother to Oliver, nor did I feel ready to invite her back into my life fully. But something about our conversation gave me a small glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, there was a path forward, even if it was one step at a time. I kept thinking about what Miss Taylor had said when I first spoke about meeting my mother. You don't have to rush it. Do it when you're ready. Her words stuck with me because they reminded me that I didn't have to force anything. I had already spent so much of my life running away from things, people who hurt me, situations that made me uncomfortable. But now, I was learning how to face those things head on. I was learning how to protect my peace while still trying to heal the parts of me that had been broken for so long. I spent the next few weeks taking things one day at a time. Oliver was growing faster than I could keep up with, his first steps now a distant memory. He was crawling everywhere, exploring the world with a level of curiosity that left me both exhausted and in awe. Every day with him felt like an adventure, and I found myself marveling at how much I had changed, how much I had grown alongside him. I wasn't the same person I had been when I was pregnant, when I was scared and uncertain, when I had no idea how I was going to make it. I had built a life for Oliver, a life full of love, even though it wasn't perfect. The world might not have been kind to me when I needed it most, but I had learned to find kindness in the small moments, in the quiet moments spent reading stories with Miss Taylor, in the way Oliver's hand would find mine when he needed comfort. But even in the midst of all this joy, there was still the question of what to do about my mother. I knew I couldn't keep avoiding it forever. She had said she would be patient, but I also knew that patience wasn't infinite. I couldn't leave her hanging in this limbo for much longer. One evening, after I put Oliver to bed, I found myself sitting in the living room with Miss Taylor, staring at the phone in my hand. I had been putting off calling my mother, but it felt like the time had come. "I'm going to call her," I said, my voice uncertain. Miss Taylor looked up from her book, her eyes soft with understanding. "You don't have to if you're not ready. But if you are, I'll be right here." I nodded, taking a deep breath as I dialed my mother's number. It rang several times before she picked up, her voice hesitant, unsure. "Hello?" "Hi, Mom," I said, my voice steady. "It's me." There was a long pause before she spoke. "I didn't expect to hear from you so soon," she said, her voice fragile, almost as if she was waiting for me to turn her away again. "I've been thinking about what you said," I replied, choosing my words carefully. "And I think it's time we take the next step." I could hear the relief in her breath, the way she let out a soft sigh as if she had been holding it for so long. "I'd like that," she said, her voice full of emotion. "I want to be a part of your life again, and I want to meet Oliver, if you're ready." "I'm not sure what it'll look like yet," I said, "but I'm willing to start. I just want to make sure this is right for me and for Oliver." "I understand," she said quickly. "I'll do whatever it takes." And with that, we made plans to meet again, but this time it wasn't just a casual cafe meeting. It was different. It was real. And even though I was still unsure, I knew this was the first step toward something. I didn't know what it would be, but I was going to face it, just like I had faced everything else in my life. The next few days were filled with a quiet tension. I didn't talk about the meeting with Miss Taylor, though I knew she could see the weight on my shoulders. She never pushed me to talk about it, but I could tell she was watching closely, waiting for me to make sense of everything. I spent my time with Oliver, focusing on him as much as possible. He was starting to say more words, beginning to understand some basic commands. I loved watching him grow, loved seeing his tiny personality shine through. He was everything I had ever wanted, and more. In his innocence, in his laughter, in the way he found joy in the smallest things, I found healing. He was my reason for everything now. He was the reason I got up in the morning, the reason I kept going when everything seemed too hard to handle. The day I was supposed to meet my mother came faster than I had expected. I had agreed to meet her at a nearby park, a neutral place where we could sit and talk. I didn't know what to expect from her, and I certainly didn't know what to expect from myself. But I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let her back into my life until I was ready. I wasn't going to be the same vulnerable girl I had been before. This time, I had boundaries. This time, I had a family that came first. I arrived early, sitting on a bench by myself, watching the people walk by with their children, families enjoying the day. It felt surreal to be here, to be waiting for my mother, to be at a point in my life where this was even happening. When she arrived, she looked a little lost, unsure of how to approach me. She was older now, her face lined with time and regret. I stood up as she walked toward me, her eyes meeting mine with a mixture of hope and fear. "Hi," she said softly, her voice tentative. "Hi," I replied, my tone calm but guarded. She stood there for a moment, unsure of what to say next. Then, slowly, she took a step forward and sat down beside me on the bench, her hands resting nervously in her lap. "I don't know how to do this," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You don't have to know," I replied, But you need to understand that this won't happen overnight. It's going to take time. And if you're serious about being a part of my life, we need to take things slowly. I'm not going to rush into anything. Watches ready Faye to the Groden to them. Watching Lee Faye to the Groden, I understand, she said, her voice thick with emotion. I'm just asking for a chance. A real chance. I nodded slowly, my heart heavy but calm. This wasn't going to be easy. It wasn't going to fix everything. But it was a start. It was the beginning of something new, something that could only move forward. The next few weeks after meeting, my mother felt like I was treading a fine line between the past and the future. I had opened a door I never thought I would, and while I wasn't sure what would come of it, I knew I couldn't go back. I wasn't sure how far I was willing to go with my mother, but I had made the decision to take things one step at a time, and with each step, I found myself growing more certain of the things that truly mattered, the things that had always been there for me, even when I had been too broken to see them. Oliver was at the center of it all, of course. His laughter, his curiosity, the way he learned something new every day, were all reminders of why I was doing this, to protect him from the pain of the past and to build a future that was full of love, stability, and joy. I wasn't going to let anything jeopardize that. Miss Taylor was, as always, my anchor. She had become more than just a mentor or a guardian to me. She was family. She didn't need to say much to let me know she was there for me, but she always seemed to know when I needed to talk, when I needed advice, and when I just needed a moment of quiet support. One evening, I sat down with her, feeling the weight of everything on my shoulders. I hadn't told her much about my last meeting with my mother, but I knew it was time to talk about it. I had made the decision to give my mother a chance, but I still wasn't sure if it was the right thing to do. Miss Taylor, I said, my voice tentative, I'm not sure what I'm doing with my mom. I don't know if I should let her be a part of Oliver's life or if I should just cut her off for good. I'm so scared of messing everything up, you know? I don't want to hurt him. I don't want to make the same mistakes. She looked at me with her usual calmness, her expression thoughtful. It's not about being perfect, she said gently. It's about being honest with yourself and with Oliver. You know what's best for him. And whatever happens with your mom, you've already built a strong foundation with Oliver. He's already surrounded by love, and that's what will matter most to him. I nodded, the reassurance in her words giving me a sense of peace. I just don't want him to feel the way I did, I admitted, my voice thick with emotion. I don't want him to feel like he's unwanted or unimportant. I never had the love I needed when I was growing up, and I don't want that for him. You're doing the best you can, Miss Taylor said, her voice full of warmth. And you're already giving him what you never had, the love and care that every child deserves. He will never feel unimportant, not with you by his side. I looked at her, feeling the weight in my chest lighten a little. It was always so easy to doubt myself, to think I wasn't enough. But in those moments when Miss Taylor spoke, I remembered that I didn't have to be perfect. I just had to show up every day and give Oliver the best of me. I don't know if I'm ready to have her in my life again, I said, my mind racing. But I can't ignore the fact that she's his grandmother. I don't know if I can keep her away from him forever, but I also don't know if I can trust her not to hurt him. It's hard to let go of all the pain. It's okay to feel that way, Miss Taylor replied softly. It's okay to take things slow. Trust isn't built overnight, and you don't have to make a decision that you're not ready for. I sighed, feeling the weight of her words settle in. I think I'm just scared. Scared of repeating the past, scared that she'll disappoint me again, and scared of letting Oliver down. No. You won't let him down, Miss Taylor said, her voice firm with conviction. You've already done so much for him. The past doesn't have to define your future, and you don't have to do this alone. You have me. You have a family now, and that means something. Her words filled me with a sense of calm that I hadn't realized I needed. I hadn't let myself fully feel the strength I had gained over the years, the strength that came from building a life for Oliver and me from the ground up. I wasn't alone anymore. I had built something real, something solid. And no matter what happened with my mother, I knew that I would protect what mattered most. The next day, I met with my mother again, this time with a clearer head and a firmer resolve. I didn't know what I wanted from this meeting, but I knew that I couldn't let it drag on indefinitely. It had been weeks since we had last spoken, and I couldn't keep putting it off. We sat down in a small cafe, the same one where we had first met. My mother looked a little more at ease this time, her face soft with the understanding that this would not be a quick fix. There was a subtle difference in the way she carried herself, like she had resigned herself to the fact that she would need to earn my trust, not expect it to be given freely. I've been thinking about what you said, I told her, my voice steady, about meeting Oliver. I'm still not sure if I'm ready for that, but I want you to know that I'm not closing the door completely. I just need more time. I need to know that you're committed to being a part of his life in a way that's healthy for all of us. She nodded, her eyes reflecting a mix of gratitude and regret. "I understand," she said softly. "I want to prove that I can be part of your life, part of his life. I know I can't change the past, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make things right. I just want to be there for you. And for Oliver." I didn't know if I could ever fully trust her again, but I also knew that forgiveness didn't have to mean forgetting. It didn't have to mean jumping straight into a relationship that wasn't ready. It could mean taking small steps toward something new, toward a different kind of future, even if it was uncertain. "I'll think about it," I said finally, my heart heavy but open. "We'll take things slowly, but I need you to understand that I won't let anyone hurt Oliver. That's my #1 priority." She nodded again, tears welling in her eyes. "I won't let you down." And in that moment, I realized that while I couldn't change the past, I could still shape the future. And maybe, just maybe, there was room for growth, for understanding, for a new kind of family, one that wasn't defined by blood, but by choice, by effort, and by love. The days that followed the meeting with my mother were filled with a strange sense of finality. I had confronted the past, faced it head-on, and made the decision that felt right for me, slow, steady, and on my terms. The weight of uncertainty that had been hanging over me for months began to lift, and I found myself breathing easier. I didn't have all the answers, but I was no longer running from the question. I was choosing to live in the present, to embrace the life I had built with Oliver and Miss Taylor, and to protect that at all costs. The uncertainty with my mother didn't disappear overnight. I didn't suddenly feel comfortable with the idea of her being in Oliver's life, but I also knew that I wasn't going to let fear control me. The path forward wasn't clear, but I was determined to walk it in my own way, at my own pace. I spent more time with Oliver, enjoying every moment of his growth. He was walking now, his tiny feet taking shaky steps as he reached for anything within arm's reach. His laughter filled the house, echoing off the walls and reminding me that I had created something beautiful. His innocence, his joy, was a reminder of why I was doing this. He was my future, my reason for everything. He deserved a life full of love, security, and most of all, family, whatever that looked like. Miss Taylor remained by my side, ever the constant, the person who had never left, who had shown me what true love and support looked like. She had been there for me when I had nowhere else to go, when I was broken, when I thought I had lost everything. And now, she was here, watching as I built the life I had always dreamed of, even when it seemed impossible. Her presence was a reminder that family didn't have to be bound by blood. It could be made of people who cared for you, who chose to love you, no matter your past. One night, after putting Oliver to bed, Miss Taylor and I sat on the porch together, just like we had so many times before. The sky was clear, the stars twinkling above, and the world felt still, like it was waiting for something. I could feel the peace in the air, the calm after the storm, and for the first time in a long while, I felt content. There was no lingering sense of fear or doubt. I was here, now, and that was enough. "You've come a long way," Miss Taylor said, her voice soft but full of pride. I nodded, feeling the weight of her words. I didn't think I could do it. I didn't think I could survive everything that happened. But here I am. "And you're doing it," she replied with a smile. "You're doing more than surviving. You're thriving." I looked out at the darkened street, the quiet neighborhood, and thought about everything I had been through. The pain, the rejection, the fear, the uncertainty. But I had made it through. And I wasn't just making it, I was living. I was loving. And most importantly, I was building something that mattered. Oliver was the center of my world, but Miss Taylor had become my foundation. I realized that the family I had created wasn't just about who was in it, but about the love we shared, the strength we drew from each other. Miss Taylor had given me that strength, had shown me what it meant to love unconditionally, and in turn, I had given that same love to Oliver. For the first time, I didn't feel haunted by the past. The ghosts of my childhood, the memories of abandonment and rejection, no longer had the power to control me. I had taken back my life, I had taken back my power, and I had built something beautiful with the people who truly cared for me. I turned to Miss Taylor, my heart full. "Thank you," I said, my voice quiet but sincere. "Thank you for everything." "Okay, from Stapt end of that side." She smiled, her eyes soft and kind. "You don't need to thank me. You've done the hard work. I'm just here to help." I leaned back in my chair, feeling a sense of peace I had never known before. It was a peace that came from knowing that I wasn't alone. I had a son who loved me, a family I had chosen, and a future I was ready to embrace. The past would always be a part of me, but it didn't define me anymore. I was writing my own story now, and it was a story of love, of strength, and of family. The next day, I woke up to Oliver's laughter, the sound that always greeted me, and I smiled, knowing that whatever happened, I had already won. I had everything I needed: love, a family, and the strength to face whatever the future held. And as I watched Oliver play, his little hands reaching for me, his eyes full of trust, I knew that I had given him the one thing I had never had: a mother who would always be there, who would always love him, no matter what. I had built this life for him and for myself, and that was something nobody could ever take away.